The crystal stemware trembled against the white tablecloth as Maya Rodriguez's hands shook, her knuckles pale against the darkness of her server's apron. Across the dimly lit dining room of Bernardin's private section, she watched the man in the charcoal suit cut into his wagyu beef with mechanical precision, unaware that his next bite could be his last conscious moment. The kitchen timer in her mind had been counting down for 7 minutes now. 7 minutes since she'd overheard the hushed conversation in the service hallway. 7 minutes since her world had tilted off its axis. The restaurant hummed with its usual Friday evening energy, but Maya felt suspended in a bubble of crystalline terror. The soft jazz filtering through hidden speakers seemed muffled, the gentle clink of silverware against china distant and hollow. Her manager, Jerome, glided between tables with his customary grace, adjusting flower arrangements and ensuring water glasses never emptied. At table 12, the elderly Weinstein couple shared their anniversary dessert, Mrs. Weinstein's diamond wedding ring catching the candlelight as she laughed at her husband's joke. Everything appeared normal, civilized, safe, a carefully orchestrated lie. Maya's gaze returned to table 7, where Marcus Chen sat alone, scrolling through emails on his phone between bites. She knew his order by heart now. Medium rare wagyu, no sauce, side of truffle mac and cheese, and a glass of the 2015 Burgundy. He'd been coming here every Friday for 8 months, always requesting her section, always polite but distant. She knew he ran some tech company, something about artificial intelligence and data security, because she'd seen his business card fall from his wallet once. What she hadn't known until 7 minutes ago was that someone wanted him dead. The conversation replayed in her mind with brutal clarity. She'd been carrying a tray of dirty dishes to the kitchen when she'd heard voices from the narrow service corridor that connected the dining room to the prep area. 2 men, speaking in low, urgent tones. She'd recognized neither voice, but their words had frozen her blood. "The sedative's already in his food. Give it 10 minutes and he'll be drowsy enough to walk out quietly. And if he doesn't cooperate, then we use the backup plan, but the client prefers him alive for the extraction." Maya had pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, as the men continued discussing logistics with chilling professionalism. They mentioned a van in the alley, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, and a ransom demand that would send a message to the entire tech industry. When their footsteps had faded, she'd remained frozen for a full minute, her mind struggling to process what she'd heard. Now, watching Marcus take another bite of his perfectly prepared dinner, Maya felt time crystallizing around her like amber. Each second stretched and contracted, heavy with possibility and consequence. She thought of her younger brother, Diego, asleep in their cramped apartment 12 blocks away, and wondered if she'd ever see him again if she did what her conscience demanded. She thought of her immigration status, still in limbo after 3 years of paperwork and legal fees. She thought of the barely there balance in her savings account and the nursing school applications hidden in her dresser drawer. But mostly, she thought about the man at table 7, methodically eating what might be his last meal as a free person. Jerome appeared at her elbow, his cologne mixing with the aroma of seared meat and reduction sauces. "Maya, table 15 needs their wine topped off, and table 3 is asking about dessert options. You feeling all right? You look a little pale."
Maya nodded automatically, her training taking over. "Just tired. Long week." She picked up a wine bottle from the service station, its weight familiar and grounding in her trembling hands. As she moved toward table 15, she caught a glimpse of movement near the kitchen doors. 2 men in dark clothing, not restaurant staff, standing with the casual alertness of predators waiting for their moment. The dining room suddenly felt like a stage set, beautiful and false, where everyone was playing roles without understanding the real drama unfolding around them. The couple at table 9 discussed their vacation plans to Tuscany while sharing a bottle of Chianti. The business dinner at table 4 had devolved into good-natured arguing about quarterly projections. At the corner booth, a young man was clearly working up the courage to propose to his girlfriend, the ring box creating a telltale bulge in his jacket pocket. All of it, every laugh, every conversation, every moment of joy and human connection felt precious and fragile, like soap bubbles that could burst at the slightest disturbance. Maya topped off wine glasses with mechanical precision, her mind racing through possibilities. She could call the police, but what would she tell them? That she'd overheard a conversation that might or might not have been about the man at table 7? That she suspected his food was drugged based on fragments of dialogue she'd heard while eavesdropping? The men she'd glimpsed could simply be late dinner reservations, and Marcus Chen could just be naturally tired after a long week. But her instincts, honed by years of reading customers and navigating the complex social dynamics of fine dining, screamed that something was wrong. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that made her skin prickle and her pulse quicken. She'd felt the same atmospheric pressure once before, the night her father had been arrested by ICE agents outside their apartment building, the night her carefully constructed world had collapsed in a matter of minutes. As she returned the wine bottle to the service station, Maya noticed that Marcus had pushed his plate away, leaving nearly half his meal untouched. His head was tilted slightly, as if he was having trouble focusing, and he'd set his phone down on the table without his usual care for its placement. The signs were subtle, but unmistakable to someone who'd spent 5 years studying human behavior through the lens of customer service. The sedative was working. One of the men near the kitchen doors checked his watch and nodded to his companion. They began moving with casual purpose toward the dining room's main exit, positioning themselves for what Maya now realized was an extraction. Marcus would finish his wine, perhaps order coffee to combat his sudden drowsiness, and then excuse himself to step outside for fresh air. The men would be waiting, along with their van and their plans for a ransom that would send a message. Maya's hands found the small silver cross her grandmother had given her, hanging on a thin chain beneath her uniform. The metal was warm from her skin, and she pressed it between her fingers as she'd done during every major decision of her life. When she decided to drop out of high school to work full-time after her mother's diagnosis, when she'd chosen to move to the city with Diego after her father's deportation, when she'd started taking night classes to become a nurse, despite everyone telling her she was dreaming too big. The cross seemed to pulse with warmth, or maybe that was just her racing heartbeat. She thought about her grandmother's stories of helping Underground Railroad conductors in their small Mexican village, how ordinary people could become heroes simply by choosing to act when action was needed. Mija, her grandmother had always said, God puts us exactly where we need to be when we need to be there. Maya had never believed she was destined for anything extraordinary. She was just a waitress saving money for nursing school, sending half her tips home to help her mother, trying to build a life from the fragments of dreams and determination her family had carried across borders and through decades of struggle. But standing in the warm glow of Le Bernardin's dining room, watching a man who didn't know his life was in danger finish what might be his last glass of wine, Maya felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She had perhaps 5 minutes before the sedative took full effect. 5 minutes to decide who she was and what kind of person she wanted to be. 5 minutes to choose between safety and conscience, between self-preservation and moral courage. The jazz quartet in the corner launched into a haunting rendition of Autumn Leaves, and Maya closed her eyes for one brief moment, gathering her strength. When she opened them again, her path was clear. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her apron, and walked directly toward table 7, where Marcus Chen sat unknowingly balanced on the edge between freedom and captivity, between life as he knew it and something far darker. The men near the exit had their eyes on him now, waiting for their signal. The restaurant continued its elegant dance around them, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. and Maya Rodriguez, 26-year-old waitress and nursing student, prepared to step into a story that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone she touched. Maya's journey to this moment had begun 3 years earlier, when she'd stepped off a Greyhound bus at Port Authority with $17 in her pocket, a duffel bag containing everything she owned, and her 15-year-old brother Diego's hand clasped tightly in hers. The city had swallowed them immediately, all noise and movement and impossible verticality, but Maya had felt something she hadn't experienced since her father's arrest: hope. Their first apartment had been a studio in Washington Heights, barely large enough for a Murphy bed and a hot plate, but it had windows that faced east toward the river, and every morning Maya would watch the sunrise paint the water gold while Diego slept on the pull-out couch. She'd found work within a week, first at a coffee shop near Columbia, then as a line cook at a Dominican restaurant, finally landing the position at Bernardin through a combination of determination, borrowed interview clothes, and what her manager Jerome later called an intuitive understanding of hospitality. Diego had thrived in ways Maya hadn't dared to hope for. His English, already better than hers, had become flawless within months. He'd thrown himself into his studies at the local high school, joining the robotics club and the chess team, making friends who invited him to birthday parties and study groups. At 17, he was already talking about college applications and engineering programs, his eyes bright with possibilities Maya had never allowed herself to imagine. Every morning, before her shift, Maya would wake at 5:30 to make Diego breakfast, usually eggs and toast, sometimes pancakes on weekends, and they'd sit together at the small table she'd found at a garage sale, planning their days and their futures. Diego would update her on his grades, his project ideas, his tentative plans for SAT prep. Maya would tell him about her customers, the interesting conversations she'd overheard, the small dramas that played out nightly in the restaurant's elegant dining rooms. At Le Bernardin, Maya had found something unexpected: a sense of purpose that went beyond mere employment. She discovered she had a gift for reading people, understanding what they needed before they asked for it, anticipating their desires, creating moments of genuine connection across the formal distance between server and customer. Regular customers requested her section specifically. Businessmen celebrating successful deals would ask her to choose their wine. Couples on anniversary dinners would confide their hopes and fears as she guided them through the evening. Marcus Chen had been no different initially. He'd started coming in 8 months ago, always alone, always ordering the same meal, always polite but distant. Maya had sensed a loneliness in him that reminded her of her own isolation during those first months in the city. She'd begun adding small touches to his service, remembering exactly how he liked his water glass positioned, bringing his wine slightly before he finished his appetizer, occasionally recommending a dessert she thought he might enjoy. Over time, she'd learned fragments of his story. He'd built his company from nothing, working 18-hour days in a shared office space in Queens before landing his first major contract. The artificial intelligence platform he'd developed helped companies identify security vulnerabilities in their data systems, boring but lucrative work that had made him wealthy beyond his modest upbringing's wildest dreams. But success had come at a cost. His marriage had ended 2 years ago, his ex-wife citing his obsession with work and his inability to be emotionally present. He had no children, few close friends, and seemed to move through his accomplished life with a sense of profound disconnection. Maya understood that kind of loneliness. Despite her close relationship with Diego and her friendships with coworkers, she'd often felt suspended between worlds,
not fully belonging to the immigrant community she'd left behind, but not yet accepted into the American dream she was still chasing. Her English was nearly perfect now, but she still caught herself translating thoughts from Spanish before speaking. Her education was progressing, but slowly enough that her goals sometimes felt impossibly distant. The weight of supporting Diego emotionally and financially had shaped every decision she'd made for 3 years. She'd turned down dates because she couldn't afford babysitters. She'd declined invitations to coworkers' parties because she needed to be home to help with homework. She'd passed up better-paying jobs at other restaurants because Le Bernardin's schedule allowed her to maintain her class attendance. Sometimes, during the quiet moments between dinner rushes, Maya would catch herself daydreaming about a different life, one where she could travel, where she could make decisions based on her own desires rather than family obligations, where she could pursue romance without calculating its impact on Diego's college fund. But these thoughts were quickly followed by guilt. Diego was brilliant, kind, and deserving of every opportunity she could provide. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give their children chances they'd never had. Maya's temporary discomfort was a small price to pay for her brother's future. Her relationship with her coworkers had evolved slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experience, rather than casual friendship. Jerome, the floor manager, had become something like a mentor, teaching her the subtle art of fine dining service and occasionally covering for her when school conflicts arose. Carmen, the head server, had taken Maya under her wing during those first overwhelming months, showing her how to manage difficult customers and navigate the restaurant's complex hierarchy. The kitchen staff had accepted her more readily, perhaps recognizing a familiar hustle in her work ethic. Louis, the sous chef, would sometimes save her a plate of the evening special when she worked double shifts. Maria, who managed the prep station, had helped her practice English during slow afternoons, correcting her pronunciation with gentle patience. But even among these friendly acquaintanceships, Maya maintained a certain distance. She'd learned early that mixing personal and professional relationships could lead to complications she couldn't afford. Her immigration status, while legal, felt perpetually precarious. Her financial situation left no room for the kind of social obligations that deeper friendships required. She was friendly, helpful, and reliable, but rarely let anyone see the exhaustion that followed her home each night, or the anxiety that kept her awake, calculating and recalculating Diego's college expenses. Her daily routine had become a carefully orchestrated balance of responsibilities and aspirations. Wake at 5:30 to make Diego breakfast and review her class notes. Subway to school for morning lectures or study sessions. Subway to work for the afternoon shift setup. 6 to 8 hours of service, maintaining the cheerful professionalism that made her one of Le Bernardin's most requested servers. Subway home, usually after midnight, to find Diego asleep at the kitchen table over his homework.
On her days off, she'd catch up on laundry and cleaning, shop for groceries with careful attention to every dollar spent, and try to steal a few hours for her own studying. Once a month, she'd video call her mother in Mexico, crafting carefully optimistic updates that emphasized Diego's achievements and her own progress while downplaying their struggles. The loneliness had become so familiar that Maya sometimes forgot it was there, like background noise in a busy restaurant. But occasionally, serving couples who laughed together over shared desserts or families celebrating milestones, she'd feel a sharp pang of yearning for connections beyond obligation and responsibility. Now, walking toward table 7, with her heart racing and her hands steady, Maya realized that everything she'd built, her careful routine, her planned future, her protective distance from emotional complications, was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The man sitting before her, methodically finishing his meal while sedatives worked through his system, represented more than just a customer in danger. He was a moment of truth that would define who Maya Rodriguez really was. Beyond. Maya approached table 7 with the fluid grace that 5 years of fine dining service had trained into her muscles, but her mind was a whirlwind of calculation and terror. Marcus Chen looked up as she neared, his eyes slightly unfocused, and she could see the effort it took for him to maintain his usual polite expression. The sedative was working faster than she'd hoped. "How was everything this evening, Mr. Chen?" she asked, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. She began clearing his plate, noting that he'd eaten less than half his meal, unusual for someone who typically finished everything she brought him. "Fine. Thank you," Marcus replied, but his words came slightly slower than normal. He rubbed his temples, a small frown creasing his forehead. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired. Long week, I suppose." Maya glanced toward the kitchen doors and saw one of the men checking his phone. Time was running out. She made her decision in the space between heartbeats, leaning slightly closer to Marcus as she arranged his utensils on the cleared plate. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I believe someone has put something in your food. You need to leave, now." Marcus blinked at her, his expression shifting from polite confusion to sharp attention despite his obvious drowsiness. "What did you say?" "Your food was drugged," Maya repeated, slightly louder but still quiet enough that adjacent tables wouldn't overhear. "Your men here who plan to take you. We need to get you out of here safely." The transformation in Marcus was immediate and striking. Despite the sedative in his system, years of business negotiations and potential hostile takeovers had trained him to recognize genuine threats. His posture straightened, his eyes sharpened, and Maya could see his mind racing even as his body struggled against the drug's effects. "How do you know this?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "I overheard them talking. They mentioned a van, a warehouse, a ransom." She continued her server's motions, refilling his water glass to maintain the appearance of normal service. "Can you walk?" Marcus tested his balance subtly, shifting his weight in his chair. "I'm dizzy, but I can manage. How do we—" "Maya," Jerome's voice cut across their whispered conversation. Her manager was approaching with his customary smile, but she could see concern in his eyes. "Mr. Chen, you look a little pale." The interruption created a moment of terrible exposure. Maya saw one of the suspicious men moving closer, his attention clearly focused on their table. In her peripheral vision, she noticed other subtle wrongness throughout the dining room. Another man near the bar who wasn't drinking, someone by the restroom hallway who seemed to be watching rather than waiting. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had built his business empire despite his obvious physical distress, "I'm not feeling well. Something I ate, perhaps. I'd like to leave immediately."
Jerome's professional concern shifted into high gear. "Of course, sir. Can I call the car for you? Or perhaps you'd prefer to rest in our private dining room until you feel better." "No," Maya interjected, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, fresh air would probably be best, but not the main entrance. The alley exit might be quieter." Both men looked at her with surprise, but Maya was already moving. Her training in crisis management, learned through years of handling difficult customers and kitchen emergencies, taking over. "Mr. Chen, let me help you to the restroom first. Jerome, could you prepare his bill? And maybe call building security." The mention of security made Jerome's eyebrows rise, but years of working in high-end hospitality had taught him to trust his staff's instincts about customer safety. "Security? Maya, what's—" "Please," Maya said, her voice carrying an urgency that cut through all pretense. "Just call them, now." Marcus stood carefully, using the table for support, and Maya immediately moved to his side. To any observer, it would look like a solicitous server helping an unwell customer, but she could feel the tension radiating from both men she was guiding through this improvised escape. As they moved toward the restroom hallway,
Maya caught sight of the suspicious men repositioning themselves. One was speaking into what looked like a phone, but was probably a radio. Another was moving toward the main entrance, while a third headed toward the kitchen, cutting off potential escape routes with military precision. "There are more of them than I thought," Maya whispered to Marcus as they reached the relative privacy of the hallway leading to the restrooms. "How many?" Marcus asked, his business mind cutting through his physical impairment to assess the tactical situation. "At least 4 that I can see, maybe more outside." Maya's mind was racing through the restaurant's layout, searching for options. "The service entrance leads to the alley, but they might have someone there too." Marcus leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment to fight the sedative's effects. When he opened them, Maya was struck by the clarity she saw there, despite his obvious physical struggle. "My phone," he said, patting his jacket pocket. "I need to call my security team and the police." "No," Maya said sharply, surprising herself with her vehemence. "If you make calls, they'll know we're onto them. They might get desperate, take hostages." The thought of her coworkers and innocent customers being put at risk because of her intervention sent a chill through Maya's entire body. She thought of the anniversary couple at table 12, the young man preparing to propose, Jerome trying to understand why his normally reliable server was acting so strangely. "Then what do you suggest?" Marcus asked, and Maya was struck by the fact that this successful, powerful man was looking to her for guidance in a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jerome appeared, his expression grave. "Maya, I called building security, and there's something you need to know. They said there's been a suspicious van parked in the alley for the past hour. The driver wouldn't leave when they asked." The confirmation of what Maya had overheard sent a new wave of terror through her system, but it also validated her instincts and gave her the credibility she needed. "Jerome, we need to call the police, right now. Mr. Chen is in immediate danger." "I don't understand." "Someone is trying to kidnap him. They drugged his food, and they're waiting for him to leave."
Jerome's face went white. In 15 years of restaurant management, he'd handled everything from kitchen fires to celebrity meltdowns, but nothing had prepared him for this level of criminal threat in his dining room. "I'm calling 911, Jerome said, reaching for his phone. "Wait," Marcus interrupted, his voice stronger despite his physical condition. "If we call the police now, these people might panic. They could hurt innocent customers." Maya felt a surge of respect for Marcus, despite their desperate circumstances. Even drugged and disoriented, he was thinking about protecting others. It reminded her of why she'd risked everything to warn him in the first place. "We need a distraction," Maya said, an idea beginning to form. "Something to draw their attention while we get Mr. Chen out safely." "What kind of distraction?" Jerome asked, his managerial mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. Maya thought quickly, drawing on her years of restaurant experience and her growing understanding of the layout and timing that controlled Le Bernardin's evening rhythms. "The alarm clock," she said. "If we trigger it, everyone has to evacuate through the main entrance. In the confusion, we can get Mr. Chen out through the kitchen to the service elevator." "That would disrupt service for everyone," Jerome protested automatically, his professional instincts conflicting with the emergency situation. "Jerome," Maya said, looking directly into her manager's eyes. "In 5 minutes, these people are going to realize their plan isn't working. When that happens, this could become very dangerous for everyone in the restaurant. We need to act now." Marcus nodded, his business experience recognizing the sound logic of Maya's assessment. "She's right. The longer we wait, the more unstable this situation becomes." Jerome looked between them, his face reflecting the weight of a decision that could affect dozens of innocent people. Maya could see him calculating risks, considering liability, weighing his responsibility to his customers against his responsibility to protect them from a threat none of them could see. "There's another option," Jerome said slowly. "The shift elevator goes directly to the parking garage. It requires a key card, but it bypasses all the main exits."
Maya felt a spark of hope. That could work, but we'd need to get past the kitchen without being seen. The shift change, Marcus said suddenly, his mind still sharp despite his physical impairment. Restaurants have shift changes. When does yours happen? Jerome checked his watch. Actually, the evening prep team leaves at 10:30. That's in 8 minutes. There's always chaos during shift change as people clock out and the night cleaning crew arrives. Perfect, Maya said, feeling pieces of a plan clicking into place. We use the shift change as cover to get through the kitchen and out through the parking garage. Jerome, can you create some kind of additional distraction in the dining room? What kind of distraction? Maya thought about the restaurant's evening rhythm, the small events that could spiral into larger disruptions. The anniversary couple at table 12, they're celebrating 50 years of marriage. What if you made a big announcement, brought out champagne, got everyone's attention focused on them? Jerome's face lit up with understanding. A spontaneous celebration. Everyone would be looking toward table 12, and the staff would be focused on the presentation. Exactly, Maya said. While that's happening, we get Mr. Chen through the kitchen and out through the parking garage. Marcus attempted to stand straighter, testing his balance. I can make it. But what about after? They'll know their plan failed. Won't they just try again?
Maya felt the weight of that question. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't fully considered the longer-term implications. These people had gone to extraordinary lengths to orchestrate this kidnapping attempt. They wouldn't simply give up because their first try had failed. One crisis at a time, Jerome said pragmatically. Right now, we get you out safely. Then we let the professionals handle the rest. The police need to know what happened, Maya added. Even if we escape, they need to catch these people before they hurt someone else. Marcus nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket. He said, I have contacts at the FBI. Corporate security threats like this fall under their jurisdiction. The mention of FBI involvement made the situation feel simultaneously more serious and more hopeful. Maya realized that her split-second decision to warn Marcus had set in motion a chain of events that would reach far beyond this single evening. Are we doing this? Jerome asked, looking at both of them. Maya thought about Diego, asleep at home, trusting her to come back safely every night. She thought about her nursing school dreams, her carefully planned future, all the reasons she had to avoid getting involved in something this dangerous. Then she looked at Marcus, fighting off sedatives and preparing to trust his life to a waitress he barely knew, and at Jerome, willing to disrupt his perfectly orchestrated restaurant to protect a customer he barely knew. We're doing this, she said. The next 7 minutes unfolded like a precisely choreographed dance between chaos and control. Jerome returned to the dining room with the kind of purposeful energy that made him legendary among Les Bernardin staff, approaching table 12 with champagne and a warm smile that betrayed none of the terror coursing through his veins. Maya watched from the hallway as he began his impromptu celebration announcement, his voice carrying across the restaurant with practiced theatrical flair. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment," Jerome called out, raising a champagne flute that caught the light like liquid gold. "We have something very special to celebrate this evening." Maya saw heads turning throughout the dining room, the natural human curiosity that drew attention towards celebrations and announcements. More importantly, she saw the suspicious men looking toward Jerome as well, their professional alertness momentarily distracted by the unexpected disruption to their carefully planned timeline. Mr. and Mrs. Weinstein are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary tonight. 50 years of love, partnership, and the kind of commitment that reminds us all what truly matters in life. The dining room erupted in spontaneous applause, the kind of heartfelt appreciation that fine dining customers love to display. Maya saw Mrs. Weinstein's face light up with surprised delight, her husband reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Even in her terror, Maya felt a moment of genuine warmth at the joy her manager was creating from such darkness. "Now," Maya whispered to Marcus, who had been using the wall to steady himself but seemed to be gaining some strength as adrenaline fought against the sedative in his system. They moved through the hallway toward the kitchen entrance, Maya's familiarity with the restaurant's layout guiding them past the prep stations where the evening shift was indeed changing over. Luis was briefing the night cleaning supervisor about a spilled wine incident, while Maria gathered her personal belongings from her locker. The normal chaos of shift change provided perfect cover for their movement. "Maya!" Luis called out as they passed, his expression curious but not suspicious. "Everything okay?" "Mr. Chen isn't feeling well. I'm just helping him to the staff elevator so he can get some fresh air in the parking garage." Luis nodded absently, already focused on explaining the evening's kitchen inventory to his replacement. Maya felt a pang of gratitude for the mundane normality of workplace routines that was providing their cover. The staff elevator was located at the far end of the kitchen, past the main cooking stations and through a service corridor that most customers never saw. As they walked, Maya's mind raced with questions about what would happen next. Getting Marcus out of immediate danger was only the first step in what was clearly a much larger and more complex situation.
"How long have they been planning this?" Marcus asked quietly as they reached the elevator. His voice was stronger now, the combination of adrenaline and time working to counteract whatever had been put in his food. "I don't know," Maya admitted, using Jerome's keycard to call the elevator. "But they seemed very professional. This wasn't some amateur operation." The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Maya breathed her first full breath in 15 minutes as the doors closed behind them. But as they descended toward the parking garage, Marcus's question echoed in her mind. The men she'd overheard had spoken with the kind of casual competence that suggested extensive planning and significant resources. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated operation that had somehow identified Marcus's weekly routine and infiltrated one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. "Maya," Marcus said, as the elevator reached the parking garage level, "I need you to understand something. What you did tonight, it saved my life, but it also means you're now involved in something very dangerous." The elevator doors opened to reveal the parking garage's fluorescent-lit expanse, filled with expensive cars that belonged to the restaurant's wealthy clientele. Maya's practical mind immediately cataloged potential threats: too many hiding places, multiple exit points, security cameras that might or might not be monitored. "What do you mean?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "These people invested significant time and money in this operation," Marcus explained, his business mind analyzing the situation even as they hurried toward his car. "They're not going to simply write off their investment because one waitress overheard their conversation." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garage's concrete coolness. In her focus on the immediate crisis, she'd been thinking like a server managing a difficult table situation, solved the problem, moved on to the next challenge. She hadn't been thinking like someone who just interfered with what was clearly a major criminal operation. They'll want to know how their plan failed. They'll want to know who you are, where you live, whether you can identify them. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Diego, her brother, asleep in their apartment, trusting her to keep their small family safe. Her mother in Mexico, dependent on the money Maya sent home. Her dreams of nursing school, built on years of careful savings and patient planning. "I have to warn my brother," Maya said, her voice tight with new fear. "Yes," Marcus agreed, opening the passenger door for her. "But first, we need to get somewhere safe and call the authorities. This is bigger than just a kidnapping attempt. This is corporate espionage, with kidnapping as the delivery mechanism." As Maya slid into the passenger seat of Marcus's car, she realized how drastically her life had just changed. 12 minutes ago, she was a waitress with clearly defined problems and goals. Now, she was a witness to a major crime, possibly a target herself, and responsible for protecting not just her own life, but her brother's future. Marcus started the engine, his hand steadier now as the sedative continued to wear off. My security team needs to know what happened. The FBI needs to be contacted, and you need protection. I need to call Diego, Maya said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Do it, Marcus agreed, backing out of the parking space with careful precision. But keep it brief. If they're monitoring communications somehow, we don't want to give them too much information. Maya dialed her brother's number as they drove up the parking garage ramp toward street level. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Diego's sleepy voice answered. Maya? It's almost midnight. Are you okay?
Diego, listen to me very carefully, Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. I need you to pack a bag with enough clothes for a few days. Call Mrs. Gonzalez and ask if you can stay with her tonight. What? Why? Maya, you're scaring me. Maya closed her eyes, hating that she was about to upend her brother's safe world the same way theirs had been destroyed when their father was arrested. Something happened at work. I can't explain right now, but we might not be safe at the apartment for a while. Are you in trouble with immigration? Diego asked, his voice sharp with the fear that had haunted their family for years. No, nothing like that. Just please, Diego, pack a bag and go to Mrs. Gonzalez's house. I'll explain everything as soon as I can. There was silence on the other end of the line, and Maya could picture her brother's face, the same expression he'd worn the night they'd fled Mexico, when their world had collapsed around them and Maya had become the only adult he could trust. Okay, Diego said finally. But Maya, whatever's happening, we'll figure it out. We always do. Maya felt tears threatening for the first time since this nightmare had begun. I love you, mijo. Be careful. I love you too. Come home safe. Maya ended the call and stared out the window as Marcus navigated through Manhattan's Friday night traffic. The familiar city lights blurred past, but everything looked different now, more dangerous, full of potential threats she'd never noticed before. Where are we going? She asked. My building. It has security, and my team can meet us there. We need to debrief everything that happened and figure out who we're dealing with. Maya thought about the men she'd glimpsed, trying to recall details that might help identify them. They were professional, she said. Military bearing, maybe? They moved like people who'd done this before. Corporate kidnapping is a growing industry, Marcus said grimly. Tech executives are particularly vulnerable because our companies often have access to information that's worth more than traditional ransom money. As they drove, Marcus made a series of phone calls through his car's hands-free system. Maya listened as he spoke with someone named Sarah, who seemed to be his head of security, an FBI contact named Agent Rivera, and his lawyer. Each conversation revealed another layer of the situation they'd stumbled into. Sarah, I need you to activate Protocol 7 immediately. Full threat assessment, and I need protection for a civilian witness. Yes, the restaurant situation we've discussed before. It finally happened. Maya felt a chill at his words. You've been expecting this? Marcus glanced at her as he ended the call. My company has been getting increased attention from foreign competitors over the past 6 months. Industrial espionage attempts, cyber attacks, unusual surveillance around my regular locations. My security team has been advising me to vary my routines, but I liked the restaurant. I liked the consistency. You liked having the same waitress, you said, with understanding dawning. You're very good at your job, Marcus said simply. You made those Friday dinners feel less like another business obligation and more like, I don't know, a small piece of normal life. Maya stared at him, realizing that what had seemed like professional distance had actually been mutual recognition of loneliness. 2 people, isolated in their own ways, finding a small connection across the formal boundaries of restaurant service. How did they know, she asked. About your routine, I mean. How did they know you'd be there tonight? Marcus's expression darkened. That's what I'm afraid to find out. Either they've been surveilling me for months, or someone told them, Maya finished.
My ex-wife knows my Friday routine. My assistant knows. My security team knows. The restaurant management knows. Marcus's voice carried the weight of betrayal, even contemplating these possibilities. Someone I trust gave them the information they needed. Maya thought about Jerome, who'd helped them escape despite not fully understanding the situation, about Luis and Maria and the other staff members who'd watched her guide Marcus through the kitchen without question. The idea that one of them might have been involved seemed impossible, but then again, an hour ago, the idea of anyone drugging a customer's food would have seemed equally impossible. Marcus's building was in Tribeca, a sleek glass tower that rose 40 stories above the city. The parking garage was staffed by uniformed security guards who greeted Marcus by name and eyed Maya with professional curiosity. As they rode the elevator to the 38th floor, Maya caught her reflection in the polished steel doors, still wearing her server's uniform, her hair slightly disheveled, her face pale with stress and exhaustion. "You should know," Marcus said as they reached his floor. "From this point forward, everything changes. The FBI will want to interview you extensively. My security team will need to assess the threat level to your safety. The media will probably get hold of this story eventually." Maya nodded, though the full implications were still sinking in. She thought about Diego, probably packing his clothes right now and wondering if her sister had somehow gotten them into trouble with the law. She thought about Luis and Maria and the other staff members who'd watched her guide Marcus through the kitchen without question. The idea that one of them might have been involved seemed impossible, but then again, an hour ago, the idea of anyone drugging a customer's food would have seemed equally impossible. Marcus's building was in Tribeca, a sleek glass tower that rose 40 stories above the city. The parking garage was staffed by uniformed security guards who greeted Marcus by name and eyed Maya with professional curiosity. As they rode the elevator to the 38th floor, Maya caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Still wearing her server's uniform, her hair slightly disheveled, her face pale with stress and exhaustion. "You should know," Marcus said as they reached his floor. "From this point forward, everything changes. The FBI will want to interview you extensively. My security team will need to assess the threat level to your safety. The media will probably get hold of this story eventually." Maya nodded, though the full implications were still sinking in. She thought about Diego, probably packing his clothes right now and wondering if her sister had somehow gotten them into trouble with the law. She thought about her job at Bernardin, whether she'd still have it after tonight's chaos. She thought about her night classes and her nursing school dreams, all balanced on a foundation that suddenly seemed much less stable. Marcus's apartment was exactly what Maya had expected: expensive, elegant, and somehow empty despite being filled with beautiful objects. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the space felt more like a high-end hotel suite than a home. There were no family photos, no personal mementos, no signs of the kind of life Maya had been fighting to build with Diego. "Can I get you something to drink?" Marcus asked, his hosting instincts taking over despite the circumstances. "Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be good," Maya said, settling onto a leather couch that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving her exhausted and shaky. As Marcus moved around his kitchen, Maya found herself studying him with new eyes. She'd known him as a polite but distant customer, someone who treated her with respect but never quite saw her as a full person. Now she was seeing the man behind the professional facade, someone who cared enough about strangers' safety to consider their welfare even while fighting off sedatives, someone lonely enough to find comfort in weekly dinner routines, someone successful enough to have enemies willing to kidnap him for information or money. "Marcus, what exactly does your company do? I know it's something with computer security, but what kind of information would be worth kidnapping you for?" Marcus settled into an armchair across from her, his expression serious. "We provide security assessments for major corporations, government contractors, and financial institutions. Our AI platform can identify vulnerabilities in data systems that human analysts might miss. So you know where the weaknesses are in important systems." "Exactly. Banks, power companies, defense contractors. If someone wanted to launch a major cyber attack, the information we have would be invaluable for targeting their efforts." Maya felt another wave of fear as she understood the scope of what they'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about money or traditional business rivalry. This was about information that could potentially threaten national security. Who would want that kind of information? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer.
Foreign governments, criminal organizations, terrorist groups, anyone who wants to cause maximum damage to American infrastructure. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the stress of the evening finally showing in his posture. My security team has been telling me for months that I'd become too high profile, too valuable a target. I should have listened. Before Maya could respond, Marcus's phone rang. He answered immediately, putting the call on speaker. "Marcus, it's Sarah. I'm in the lobby with Agent Rivera and 2 other federal agents. Are you and the witness secure?" "Yes, we're in my apartment. Maya's here with me." "Good, we'll be up in 2 minutes. Maya, I need you to start thinking about everything you saw and heard tonight. The agents are going to want a complete debrief." Maya felt her stomach clench with anxiety. In her years in the United States, she'd managed to avoid any significant interaction with law enforcement. Now, she was about to be interviewed by federal agents about a crime she'd helped prevent. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd risked her safety to protect Marcus, and now she needed protection herself. "Maya," Marcus said, noticing her expression, "these people are here to help. Agent Rivera is someone I trust completely." Maya nodded, but her mind was racing with concerns that went beyond the immediate situation. What if the investigation revealed her family's complicated immigration history? What if her involvement in this case somehow jeopardized Diego's chance at college, at the American dream she had been working so hard to secure for him? The knock on the apartment door came exactly 2 minutes later. Marcus checked the security monitor before opening it, admitting a group that looked like they'd walked out of a crime drama. Serious faces, dark suits, the kind of professional competence that was both reassuring and intimidating. Agent Rivera was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair, but Maya could see the steel beneath her gentle demeanor. She introduced herself and her colleagues with warm professionalism, thanking Maya immediately for her courage in preventing what could have been a major national security incident. "Miss Rodriguez, I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. You're a hero. But we need to understand exactly what happened tonight, and we need to assess what kind of protection you and your family might need going forward." Maya took a deep breath, thinking about Diego, hopefully safe at Mrs. Gonzalez's apartment, about her mother waiting for their weekly phone call, about all the ways her careful life was about to change. Then she looked at Marcus, who was watching her with gratitude and concern, and at the federal agents who were treating her with respect despite her waitress uniform and obvious exhaustion. "Where do you want me to start?" Maya asked, straightening her shoulders with the same determination that had carried her family across borders and through years of struggle. Agent Rivera smiled. "Start from the beginning. Tell us everything." The debriefing lasted until 4 in the morning. Maya recounted every detail she could remember, the conversation she'd overheard, the men's positions in the restaurant, their professional demeanor, the timing of everything that had followed. Agent Rivera and her team took notes, asked clarifying questions, and gradually built a picture of what they believed was a sophisticated operation backed by significant resources.
"Based on what you've told us," Agent Rivera said as the session wound down, "we're dealing with professionals who had inside information about Mr. Chen's routines. The level of planning suggests either foreign intelligence services or a very well-funded criminal organization." Maya felt exhausted but strangely relieved. The agents had treated her with respect throughout the interview, never making her feel like a suspect or an outsider. They'd focused on her observations and insights, valuing her perspective as someone who understood the restaurant's normal rhythms and could identify what had been unusual about the evening. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "We investigate," Agent Rivera replied. "We'll analyze the security footage from the restaurant and surrounding area, interview the staff, and try to identify the individuals involved. Meanwhile, you and your brother will need protection until we can determine the scope of the threat." The word protection sent a new wave of anxiety through Maya's system. What kind of protection? "Safe house accommodation for a few days while we assess the situation," Agent Rivera explained gently.
I know it's disruptive, but these people invested months in planning tonight's operation. They won't simply walk away because it failed. Marcus, who had been mostly quiet during the latter part of the interview, leaned forward. Agent Rivera, I'd like to cover any expenses associated with Ms. Rodriguez's protection. Lost wages, accommodation costs, anything she needs. Maya started to protest, but Agent Rivera held up a hand. Actually, Mr. Chen, we'll need to discuss compensation anyway. Ms. Rodriguez will likely qualify for witness protection benefits, and depending on how this investigation develops, there may be reward money available. Reward money? Maya asked. Corporate espionage cases often carry significant financial rewards for witnesses who help prevent major security breaches. We're talking about protecting information that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars if it fell into the wrong hands. Maya stared at the agent, trying to process this information. For 3 years, she had been calculating every dollar, stretching every paycheck, saving toward goals that sometimes seemed impossibly distant. The idea that her split-second decision to warn Marcus might result in financial compensation was almost too overwhelming to contemplate. "I didn't do it for money," Maya said quietly. "We know," Agent Rivera replied with a warm smile. "That's exactly why you deserve to be compensated for the courage you showed and the risks you've taken." As the federal agents prepared to leave, arranging for protective details and safe-house logistics, Marcus approached Maya with an expression that was difficult to read. "I owe you my life, but more than that, I owe you an apology." "An apology for what?" Maya asked in confusion. "For 8 months, I came to your restaurant every Friday. You served me with such grace and professionalism, and I never really saw you. I saw a waitress, a function, but not the person. Not the woman who is taking night classes and supporting her family and building a life from scratch. It took you saving my life for me to realize how much courage and intelligence you show every single day." Maya felt tears threatening again. In all her years of service work, no customer had ever acknowledged the complexity of her life beyond the dining room. The recognition felt almost as overwhelming as everything else that had happened. "You were always kind," Maya said. "You treated me with respect. That meant more than you know." "It wasn't enough. And I want to change that, not just for you, but for how I see the people who make my life possible every day."
Over the next week, Maya and Diego stayed in a safe house in Queens, a comfortable apartment guarded by federal agents who were surprisingly good company. Diego, once he understood the situation, was fascinated by the security protocols and peppered the agents with questions about cybersecurity and law enforcement careers. Maya found herself grateful for her brother's resilience and adaptability, the same qualities that had helped him thrive after their immigration to the United States. The investigation moved quickly. Security footage from Le Bernardin and surrounding streets helped identify several members of the kidnapping team. Bank records revealed that the operation had been funded through a series of offshore accounts linked to a foreign intelligence service. 3 arrests were made within days, though the FBI suspected that others involved in the operation had already left the country. Jerome called Maya repeatedly during her time in protective custody, first to ensure her safety, then to tell her that her job would be waiting whenever she was ready to return. The entire restaurant staff, he reported, was buzzing with pride about their colleagues' heroism. The story had broken in the media, though Maya's identity was protected, and Le Bernardin was being praised for its staff's quick thinking and professionalism under pressure. "You've become something of a legend around here," Jerome told her during one phone call. "The servers are all talking about trusting their instincts more, paying attention to things that seem off. You've changed how we think about taking care of our customers." Maya felt a warmth at Jerome's words that went beyond simple professional satisfaction. Her actions had created ripples that extended beyond the immediate crisis, encouraging others to see their work as more than just service, as genuine care for human beings. On her 5th day in the safe house, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Marcus arrived with Agent Rivera's clearance, carrying flowers and a manila envelope that he set on the kitchen table with obvious nervousness. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into one of the safe house's generic chairs. "Better than I expected,"
Maya replied honestly. Diego thinks this is all very exciting. He's been asking the agents about their career paths. He sounds like a remarkable young man. You've done an incredible job raising him. We've raised each other, Maya corrected. That's how families work. Marcus nodded, then gestured toward the envelope. I wanted to talk to you about something. The FBI confirmed that the information these people were after could have caused massive damage to national security if they'd succeeded. Financial systems, power grids, defense networks, all of it could have been compromised. Maya felt the familiar weight of consequence settling on her shoulders. I'm glad we stopped them. Maya, the reward money from the federal government is going to be substantial. 6 figures, possibly more. But I wanted to offer you something additional. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a set of documents. I've been thinking about what you said, about nursing school, about your dreams. Maya looked at the papers he'd spread on the table. Information packets from several prestigious nursing programs, scholarship applications, and what looked like a formal letter on corporate letterhead. I've established a scholarship fund, not just for you, though you'll be the first recipient if you want it, but for other people like you. People working in service industries who are pursuing healthcare careers. People who understand that taking care of others is both a job and a calling. Maya stared at the documents, her mind struggling to process what Marcus was offering. Full tuition, living expenses, even funding for Diego's college education. Everything she'd been working toward for years suddenly within reach because of a few moments of moral courage. I can't accept this, Maya said automatically. Why not? Marcus asked gently. Maya thought about her grandmother's stories of helping Underground Railroad conductors, about doing the right thing simply because it needed to be done. Because I didn't help you for a reward. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Maya, you saved my life, but you also showed me something I'd forgotten. You reminded me that every person we encounter is fighting battles we know nothing about, pursuing dreams that matter just as much as our own success.
He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I want to use my resources to help people like you, not as charity, but as investment in the kind of courage and compassion this world needs more of. If you accept this scholarship, you won't just be getting an education, you will be the first person to benefit from a program that could help hundreds of others. Maya looked at the documents again, thinking about Diego's bright future, about her mother who would finally stop worrying about their financial security, about the nursing career that could now become reality rather than distant dream. But mostly, she thought about the other servers and kitchen workers and cleaning staff who were fighting their own battles, pursuing their own dreams with the same determination she'd shown. If I accept, Maya said slowly, I want to help design the program. I want to make sure it reaches people who really need it, people who might not know how to apply for traditional scholarships. Marcus's face lit up with genuine joy. I was hoping you'd say that. I need someone who understands what it's like to build a life from scratch, someone who knows what courage looks like in everyday situations. Over the following months, as the legal proceedings continued and the media attention gradually faded, Maya's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. She entered nursing school full-time, her scholarship covering not just tuition, but also living expenses that allowed her to focus entirely on her studies. Diego thrived in his senior year of high school, his college application strengthened by essays about resilience and family loyalty that admissions counselors found compelling. Maya also found herself working closely with Marcus on the Scholarship Foundation, interviewing candidates and helping design programs that reached into immigrant communities and service industries where traditional outreach often failed. She discovered that she had a talent for recognizing potential in people who hadn't been given opportunities to shine, just as Marcus had learned to see her potential after months of overlooking it. The work was deeply fulfilling in ways that surprised her. She'd expected nursing to be her calling, and she still loved her clinical rotations and patient care experiences, but helping other people access education and opportunity felt like an extension of the same impulse that had made her warn Marcus that night. the recognition that everyone deserved protection, care, and the chance to pursue their dreams. 6 months after the incident, Maya returned to Le Bernardin for the first time since that Friday night. Jerome had arranged a small celebration for the entire staff, honoring her courage and announcing that she would be speaking at the restaurant's annual training session on trusting instincts and protecting customers. The dining room looked exactly the same. Elegant, warm, filled with the soft sounds of conversation and clinking crystal. But Maya saw it differently now. She noticed the servers moving with purpose and pride, the kitchen staff working with professional precision, the management team overseeing everything with renewed attention to security and staff empowerment. Table 7 was occupied by a young couple celebrating an engagement, their faces bright with joy and possibility. Maya felt a moment of profound gratitude for the ordinary beauty of their happiness, for the chance to witness love and hope flourishing in a space that had once been threatened by darkness. "You know," Jerome said, appearing at her elbow with his customary warmth, "we've had 3 servers apply for nursing programs since your story came out, and 2 kitchen staff members have started taking English classes. You've inspired people to dream bigger." Maya smiled, thinking about the ripple effects that continued to spread outward from that single moment of decision. Maybe that's the real victory. Not stopping the bad thing from happening, but inspiring good things to grow from it. As she prepared to leave the restaurant that evening, Maya paused at the hostess stand where she'd started her journey years ago. The young woman working there, Carmen's niece, recently arrived from El Salvador, looked up with shy recognition. "Miss Rodriguez, I wanted to thank you. My aunt told me about everything you've done and about the scholarship program. I'm applying next semester to study physical therapy." Maya felt the familiar warmth that came from seeing potential flourish. "Good for you. And remember, when people tell you to trust your instincts, they're usually right. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is pay attention and care enough to act." 3 years later, Maya stood in the auditorium of Mount Sinai Hospital, adjusting the sleeves of her new nurse's uniform as she waited to address the incoming class of nursing students. The morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating faces filled with the same mixture of determination and anxiety she remembered from her own first day. But now, as a recent graduate and recipient of the hospital's Excellence in Patient Care Award, she was here to welcome them into a profession that had transformed her understanding of what it meant to heal. "Good morning," Maya began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from years of practicing compassion under pressure. "My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I want to tell you about the night I learned that being a nurse starts long before you ever set foot in a hospital." She told them about Le Bernardin, about the moment of decision that had changed everything, about the recognition that caring for others was both a skill and a calling that could manifest anywhere, anytime. The students listened with rapt attention, some taking notes, others leaning forward with the hunger for purpose that Maya recognized from her own journey. After her presentation, a young man approached her, tall, serious, wearing scrubs that looked new enough to still hold their creases. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm David Chen. Marcus Chen is my uncle." Maya felt a jolt of surprise and warmth. She'd heard from Marcus regularly over the past 3 years as their foundation work had expanded, but she'd never met his family. "David, your uncle talks about you all the time. He said you were starting nursing school." David smiled, and Maya could see the family resemblance in his thoughtful expression. "He told me about that night at the restaurant, about how you changed his perspective on service and caring. That conversation is actually what made me switch from business school to nursing." Maya felt the familiar wonder at how actions rippled outward in ways that could never be predicted. Marcus's nephew, inspired by a story about his uncle's rescue, choosing to dedicate his life to healthcare. The young woman from El Salvador, now thriving in physical therapy school. Diego, who had graduated valedictorian and was studying computer engineering with a focus on cybersecurity ethics, inspired by the federal agents he'd met during their time in protective custody. "How is your uncle?" Maya asked. "Different," David replied thoughtfully. Better, I think. He still works hard, but he pays attention to people now. He knows his doorman's daughter is applying to college, knows his assistant is taking care of her sick mother. He sees people instead of just functions. Maya nodded, remembering her last conversation with Marcus when he'd called to congratulate her on her graduation. He'd sounded more grounded, more connected to the world around him. Success, he'd told her, meant nothing if it was built on not seeing the humanity of the people who made that success possible. That afternoon, Maya was working her shift in the cardiac ICU when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message made her stop in the middle of updating a patient chart. "Miss Rodriguez, this is Special Agent Rivera. I wanted you to know that the last member of the kidnapping ring was arrested yesterday in Prague. The case is finally closed. Your courage
3 years ago has led to a major disruption of international corporate espionage. Thank you for your service to your country." Maya stared at the message, remembering the federal agents who had treated her with such respect during those first terrifying days. She thought about justice delayed but not denied, about consequences that sometimes took years to fully unfold. The men who had planned to drug Marcus and extract national security information from him were now in prison, their network dismantled, their ability to threaten others eliminated. She forwarded the message to Diego, now a junior at Columbia, studying the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. His response came immediately. "Wow, you're still saving people 3 years later. I'm so proud to be your brother." Maya smiled as she tucked her phone away and returned to her patient care. Mr. Petrov, the elderly Russian immigrant recovering from bypass surgery, was awake and trying to read a letter from his granddaughter in Moscow. Maya helped him adjust his reading glasses and position the letter where he could see it comfortably. "Thank you, nurse," Mr. Petrov said in heavily accented English. "You have kind hands. My granddaughter, she wants to be nurse too. In Russia, very difficult. Here, maybe possible." Maya felt the familiar surge of purpose that came from recognizing need and knowing she had the power to help. "Tell me about her," she said, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "What's her name? What kind of nursing is she interested in?" As Mr. Petrov talked about his granddaughter's dreams, Maya made mental notes about scholarship opportunities and immigration resources that might help. The foundation she and Marcus had established had grown beyond their original vision, now helping not just service workers, but anyone whose circumstances had blocked their path to healthcare careers. 2 years later, Maya received an invitation that made her laugh with joy. Diego was getting married to a young woman he'd met in his graduate program, a brilliant computer scientist whose family had immigrated from Vietnam. The wedding would be small but meaningful, held in the community center where Maya had first learned English, surrounded by the neighborhood that had watched them both grow and succeed. "I want you to give a speech at the reception," Diego told her over dinner at their now comfortable apartment in Queens, "about taking care of people, about trusting your instincts, about the night you changed both our lives." Maya looked at her brother, tall, confident, successful, but still the same kind boy who held her hand on that first terrifying bus ride to New York. "What do you want me to say?" "Tell them about courage, not the big dramatic kind, but the everyday kind. The kind that pays attention to people who need help, even when helping them might cost you something." At the wedding reception, Maya stood before a room filled with friends, colleagues, and chosen family. She saw Marcus and his new girlfriend, a social worker he'd met through volunteer work at a community clinic. She saw Carmen from Le Bernardin, now a restaurant manager herself, and several of the scholarship recipients who had become nurses, teachers, and social workers. She saw Agent Rivera, who had become a friend over the years and was now working on a task force that used insights from their case to prevent other corporate espionage attempts. "When I was 26 years old, I thought courage meant dramatic gestures, saving lives, stopping disasters, changing the world in obvious ways. Then one Friday night, I learned that real courage is much quieter than that. It's paying attention when everyone else is distracted. It's speaking up when staying silent would be safer. It's trusting that caring about strangers is never a waste of time.
She told the story of that night, but focused on the lessons that had emerged in its aftermath. How trust and attention could prevent tragedies. How treating people with dignity could change their entire life trajectory. How small acts of courage could ripple outward for years, creating opportunities and healing that the original actor might never see.
My brother Diego and I came to this country with nothing but hope and determination, Maya concluded. Today, he's a computer engineer working to make artificial intelligence more ethical and transparent. I'm a nurse supervisor at one of the city's major hospitals. But neither of us would be here without the people who took chances on us, who saw our potential when we couldn't see it ourselves. Maya paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had become family through choice rather than blood. The most important thing I've learned is that we're all responsible for taking care of each other, not just in dramatic moments of crisis, but every day, in small ways that might seem insignificant, but that can change everything. 5 years later, Maya was featured on the cover of Nursing Today magazine, photographed in the pediatric ICU where she now worked as head nurse. The article detailed her journey from undocumented waitress to healthcare leader, but focused primarily on the scholarship foundation that had now helped over 200 people enter healthcare careers. The foundation receives applications from all over the country now, Maya told the interviewer. Restaurant workers, cleaning staff, home health aides, security guards, people who are already in the business of taking care of others but haven't had the opportunity to do it professionally. The article mentioned that Maya was engaged to a fellow nurse she'd met during a disaster response training, a quiet man who shared her passion for emergency preparedness and community health. Their wedding would be the following spring, and Diego would serve as her man of honor. Marcus, now a regular volunteer at the Foundation's mentoring program, was quoted extensively in the article. "Maya saved my life in more ways than one," he said. "She reminded me that success means nothing if it's not connected to the welfare of others. The night she warned me about the drugged food was the night I learned what real wealth looks like. It looks like having the courage to care about strangers." The article concluded with Maya's philosophy of nursing care. "Every patient I see is someone's most important person. Every interaction is an opportunity to provide not just medical care, but human dignity. The skills I learned waiting tables, reading people's needs, anticipating what they require before they asked for it, making them feel seen and valued. Those skills save lives every day." On a cold December evening, 10 years after the incident at Le Bernardin, Maya was finishing her shift in the pediatric ICU when she received a call that made her heart skip. Jerome, now in his 70s, but still managing Le Bernardin with his characteristic grace, was calling with news that would close a circle she'd never expected to see completed. "Maya, I have someone here who wants to thank you," Jerome said, his voice warm with the affection that had never dimmed over their years of friendship. "Who?" Maya asked, puzzled. "Remember Mrs. Weinstein from the anniversary dinner that night? She's here with her great-granddaughter who just graduated from nursing school. Apparently watching you that night, seeing your courage and compassion, inspired this young woman to pursue healthcare. She wanted to meet the nurse who changed her career path before she'd even chosen one." Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she remembered the elderly couple whose anniversary celebration provided cover for Marcus's escape. "Is she there? Can I speak with her?" A young woman's voice came on the line, bright with nervous excitement. "Miss Rodriguez, my name is Sarah Weinstein. I know this sounds crazy, but 10 years ago, I was having dinner with my great-grandparents when something dramatic happened in your restaurant. I was 15 and planning to study business, but watching how you handled that crisis, the way you protected people while keeping everyone calm, made me realize I wanted to spend my life taking care of others." Maya sat down heavily in the break room chair, overwhelmed by the reach of consequences she'd never imagined. A 15-year-old girl, barely noticed in the chaos of that evening, had been watching and learning from her actions. That teenager was now a registered nurse, ready to begin her own career in caring for others. "Sarah," Maya said, "I would love to meet you, and I'd love to tell you about our scholarship foundation in case you know anyone who might benefit from it. Actually, Sarah replied, I was hoping you might need volunteers. I want to give back the way you have. I want to help other people find their path to nursing. After the call ended, Maya sat in the quiet break room, thinking about circles of influence that expanded outward like ripples in a pond. She thought about all the lives that had been touched by that single moment of decision. Not just Marcus, but PCI nurses who were now ready to begin their own journeys of care and courage. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo from Diego's wedding 5 years earlier. In it, she stood surrounded by the scholarship recipients who had become nurses, the federal agents who had become friends, Marcus and his wife, Jerome from the restaurant, and dozens of others whose lives had intersected because of one moment of moral clarity. At the bottom of her contact list, she found a number she'd saved but never called. Mrs. Weinstein's great-granddaughter, Sarah, had left her information that night at Le Bernardin, asking if Maya ever needed anything. Now Maya realized what she needed, what she'd always needed. She typed a simple message. Sarah, this is Maya Rodriguez. I was thinking about that night 10 years ago and realized I never properly thanked your great-grandparents. Their anniversary celebration gave us the cover we needed to save a life. Sometimes the most important thing we do is just be present when others need us to be there. The response came immediately. She would have loved knowing that. Great-grandma always said the best way to celebrate love was to help it flourish wherever you found it. Maya smiled, thinking about circles within circles, ripples that never truly ended. Tomorrow she would return to the pediatric ICU, where she would care for children whose futures were still being written. Next month, she would interview scholarship candidates who reminded her of herself 10 years ago. Hard-working, determined, carrying dreams that seemed impossible until someone believed in them. But tonight, she would go home to her husband and call Diego to tell him about Sarah Weinstein, about the teenager who had been watching that night and learning about courage from a waitress who was just trying to do the right thing. The circle, Maya realized, was never really complete. It just kept expanding, touching lives in ways that would continue long after she was gone. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.